You want to be in a galaxy where Star Trek isn't lame. You want to go where everybody knows your name.
Hey guys, Michael J. Crawford, the Anti-Trekker here. Free will. Do we have it? Now I know this is not my normal topic, but I think it's an interesting question, and it will relate to Star Trek eventually, I promise. First of all, what exactly is free will? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, free will has two distinct entries. Entry number 1, voluntary or spontaneous. Entry number 2, a voluntary choice or decision, as in, I do this of my own free will. Or number 2, freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by prior causes or by divine intervention. It is that last definition that I think serves our purpose. After all, I do not think that when anyone ponders the question of if we have free will, they are referring to the ability for us to make voluntary choices or behave in a spontaneous manner. After all, those kinds of things are rather self-evident and can be observed in people on a daily basis. Rather, free will is the deeper question of, do we choose for ourselves what we do, or is every decision simply the unavoidable consequence of our past experience? So, to put my bias up front, so that you know where I stand, for me personally, I stand firmly in the pro-free will camp. René Descartes' cogito ergo sum, or more commonly known as I think, therefore I am, elegantly shows what I believe is absolute proof of free will. This proof, while absolute, is also unfortunately subjective, and so while I cannot prove it to you, I know with 100% certainty that I exist, and I have free will.
What about self-awareness? What does that mean? Why am I self-aware?
Because you are conscious of your existence and actions. You are aware of yourself and your own ego.
Because I am self-aware of my own existence, and I am conscious of my own free will decisions. And while you could possibly cast doubt as to if all of humanity has free will, I would dare say that it is impossible, barring a massive shift in my core beliefs, that you could convince me that I have no free will myself. For if you consider the only substantial counter-argument that I personally ever heard is,
but wait, how do you know that what you believe you're experiencing free will is nothing more than an illusion?
you run into an even greater problem. An illusion that fools whom exactly? Now, to get started with this, we need to consider some of the consequences of if there is or is not free will. There are some interesting theological and philosophical implications that we could definitely state if there is or is not free will. From a theological front, answering the free will question would not eliminate the possibility of God or gods existing. However, it would substantially limit the type of God or gods that could exist. For example, if we could categorically state that there was in fact no free will, then the mainstream Abrahamic faiths would be out the door, since the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions all refer to a God that does in fact bestow free will upon humanity. On the flip side, if we could state that there was indeed free will, then some of the more fringe sects of these same faiths would have trouble, since there are groups within the Abrahamic faiths that do not believe in free will. Further, any faith that believes that supernatural beings control our every thought, or that we simply react the only way we can based on our internal programming, would work with no free will, but not if there was. Moving from theology to a more general philosophic perspective, I think that the concept of pure naturalism or atheism struggles a little if free will was ever proven, which is, in my opinion, a major reason why prominent atheists like Sam Harris have not only argued very strongly against the concept of free will, but have also written whole books on the topic. I think the problem with free will in combination with an atheistic worldview appears to me, at least, to be obvious. If all things in the universe are simply a natural progression of events, regardless of if those events are so complex that we could never hope to truly understand them all, then the thought process must be like everything else, just a very complex chemical reaction to stimuli, and there is no more free will than there would be free will for light to refract in a prism. This is true even down to the quantum level. While many try to use the uncertainty principle as a get-out-of-jail-free card when having these kinds of discussions, keep in mind that really the point of the uncertainty principle is not about cause and effect, rather the idea that on the subatomic scale, the act of observing something can and does in fact alter the outcome, and we cannot predict exactly what that outcome will be. Only the probability of what answer may be more or less likely when compared to other possible answers. Unpredictability is not the same as independence. Or, if we go back to our definition of free will, that is, freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by prior causes or by divine intervention, just because we do not know the detail of those prior causes would not mean we are independent of the aforementioned prior cause. In fact, I would submit that logically, free will cannot exist in a purely naturalistic worldview. It does, in fact, require the existence of the supernatural in one form or another for us to be able to make our choices independent of prior cause. So, in what I would consider a rather interesting and ironic point, in order for us to act independently of God, God must exist. Now, at this point, I want to talk about what is not free will, and that is preference. Keep in mind that preference is not the same thing as choice. I can choose if I'm going to eat a top sirloin steak or beef liver for dinner. However, I cannot choose if top sirloin or beef liver tastes better to me. Well, kind of. While preference is not something I can choose at will, it is something that I can train over time. So while I may prefer the taste of that top sirloin over liver right now, and I cannot simply decide I prefer liver, I can force myself through positive or negative reinforcement to at first tolerate and then eventually enjoy and even prefer the taste of liver. What we prefer in some ways is a part of our genetic makeup. However, I would argue it is mostly a response to our environment. For example, most food preferences, artistic preferences, etc., are very much a part of our culture. So in one nation, a common meal may be downright disgusting to someone in another culture.
What is that?
It's a Klingon delicacy. Hippias claw. This is heart of Targ. This, of course, is Gog.
Gawk?
Yes, serpent worms. Would you like some?
However, after enough exposure, one can learn to appreciate the culinary delights of cultures that may appear, well, at best, strange at first.
Yesterday, I did not know how to eat Gach.
So while preference can be altered over time, it would not qualify as free will in a meaningful way, since it is very much dependent on prior experience. So you would think that it appears that we have a solid case for the non-existence of free will, right? Well, no. The problem is, with assuming no free will, is to ignore two things that people tend to think support no free will, but actually have the opposite effect: emotions and belief. It is argued that, like preference, emotional reactions are not a matter of free will, and I would agree. Again, using our definition, emotions are directly dependent on prior experience. We feel anger because we see an injustice. We feel happy because something goes our way. We feel sad when a loved one passes away, and so forth. Further, people tend to say that you cannot choose if you believe, at least on an instinctual level, if something is true or false. On that, I also agree. We believe the sun will rise because we've seen it rise every day before. We believe someone is telling the truth because they've always been honest to us. We distrust someone because they're a politician. However, herein lays the problem. And here is where we tie it all to Star Trek. Specifically, Star Trek The Next Generation, and even more specifically, the character of Data. Data is a near-perfect representation of a being with no free will. He can only behave in a way that his programmer, Dr. Soong, designed.
It has the ability to learn and understand and to cope with new situations.
Like this hearing.
Yes.
While his positronic brain can learn and adapt to new things, and Data can interact with these new things in a way that comes very close to that of a being with free will, he still relies on things like his ethical subroutine to guide him into making the correct choice. Now, to be fair, Data is a fictional character, and unfortunately the writers of Star Trek The Next Generation do not write him completely consistently. But for the most part, Data demonstrates exactly what humans would be like if, in fact, there was no free will. And, in fact, using something that you wouldn't expect from a character like Data: emotions. In the two-part episode Descent, Data is given flashes of true emotional reactions. Those emotions are being given to him by his brother, Lore. In the episode, after a few brief encounters with emotional gratification, Data completely and willingly betrays his lifelong friends and trusted shipmates. Not because Lore is controlling Data's behavior. Lore is only controlling his emotional response. In an interesting scene after Data experiences anger, he discusses the situation with Troy.
Anger is a negative emotion. I wanted to concentrate on something more positive.
Data, feelings aren't positive and negative. They simply exist. It's what we do with those feelings that becomes good or bad.
Troy is quite correct. Emotions are neither good nor bad. They simply are involuntary reactions to various stimuli. But here's the kicker.
How about that, Data? He won't even let you talk.
Do not try to drive a wedge between us, Captain. I am loyal to my brother.
Data, after experiencing these emotions, is completely okay with not only betraying his friends, but torturing his best friend even to the point of permanent brain damage.
Don't you care that he's manipulating you?
However, there is a 60% chance he will not survive the procedure.
I don't care much for those odds.
They are a cause for concern.
And yet we all know Data to be a good person. How could this be? The answer is simple. Because Data lacks free will. And unlike his comrades, or you and I, you see, we feel anger when someone does something we don't like. We may feel jealous if someone makes unwelcome advances on our significant other. But we can override those emotional responses and make a choice based on our own free will. Since Data lacks free will, he has no choice but to follow his emotions wherever they naturally lead. When he feels anger directed at a Borg drone, he mercilessly snaps its neck. We, however, could reason that while we may want to snap the neck of that jerk that cuts us off in traffic or refuses to wear a mask because they think it is their right, we may even believe that they deserve to have their neck snapped because of how inconsiderate they're being in regards to the peace of mind and well-being of those around them. However, we can go against that emotional response by using our free will to supersede our emotions and beliefs. We may have no choice but to believe a fight is hopeless, or that there is no solution to a particular problem. However, we can choose to ignore those beliefs and fight on or keep working on that problem. Heck, in a secular versus religious debate, I have heard it over and over, the argument from atheists that they cannot simply choose to believe something that they instinctively believe is untrue. That is only correct to a point. You cannot simply flip a switch in your head to believe in something.
Chekhov is dead because he believed the bullets would kill him. If we do not allow ourselves to believe that the bullets are real, they cannot kill us.
We're just human beings, Spock. We don't have that clockwork ticker in our head like you do. We can't just turn it on and off.
We must.
However, you can choose to go against your instinctive belief, or to quote the common vernacular, go against your better judgment. You can, in fact, choose what you believe, and you can learn to control your emotions, because you, in fact, do have free will. Unless you're Data. Take care.
You want to be in a galaxy where Star Trek isn't lame. You want to go where everybody knows your name.